The door splintered under the weight of their bodies, the sound sharp and jarring against the quiet of the rural landscape. In an instant, the echoes of their fierce assault shattered the stillness of the night. Little did they know they were stepping into a battleground, the kind of place where the ground held secrets and the air was thick with tension. The farmer, John McAllister, wasn't what you'd call an ordinary man. Life had shaped him with grit and determination. He was a man of the land, his hands rough from years of tilling and tending. But tonight, he was more than just a farmer. He was a guardian, a protector of everything he held dear. And when those intruders kicked in the door, they were met not with silence, but with the quiet hum of resolve. Inside his modest home, surrounded by the scent of fresh earth and the faint gauze of the evening air, John sat at his kitchen table. The worn surface was peppered with notes and plans, but his eyes were fixed on a much bigger picture. He heard the ruckus outside, and adrenaline surged through him. He had known this moment might come. The tension had been building for weeks, a storm that crackled on the horizon. As the door crumbled, John's heart raced, but his mind was clear. Locked and loaded, he had told himself more than once, a mantra he repeated to find comfort in chaos. The rifle, heavy and cold, rested against his knee like an old friend. He had always believed in defending what was his land, his family, his way of life. The intruders burst in, 4 figures cloaked in shadows, their faces hidden behind masks. Fueled by greed and arrogance, they took a step into his domain, seeking what they believed was an easy target. But targets have a way of fighting back, especially when they're cornered. John remained where he was, concealed in the dim light, the chaos erupting all around him. He could hear their laughter, a cruel mockery of his peaceful living. They rifled through drawers, through open cabinets, and cursed when nothing of value appeared. They were searching for something to fill their emptiness, money perhaps, or power to reclaim what they felt they lacked. But what they didn't realize was that John McAllister wasn't just some farmer. He wasn't someone to back down. He was a man forged by hardships, the kind of man who knows how to fight for what's right. He had survived the barren seasons and the bitter storms, always come out the other side with nothing but his will intact. They moved toward the hall, their strides confident, the echo of their boots against the wooden floor taunting him. John gripped the rifle tightly. Every muscle in his body was taut, ready for the instinctual response that surged within him. The years of dedication to the land and family slipped through his mind, teaching his children to respect their roots, planting seeds for the future, but having to face this horrifying reality now. As they approached, John took a deep breath. The moment stretched, the weight of it hanging heavy in the air. His heart thundered, not just with fear, but with a fierce determination that ignited his spirit. They had underestimated him, judged him poorly. They assumed that the farmer's quiet life meant he would be harmless at crunch time, but they were dead wrong. John stood up, the chair scraping against the floor, making a noise that cut through the room. They turned, startled, surprise flickered across their faces. In that moment, the mood shifted. Empowered by his sudden presence, John felt the adrenaline blaze through him. It was fight or flight, and he chose to fight. He yelled, his voice commanding, firm. It cut through the bravado of the intruders like a hot knife through. For a moment, they hesitated, taking stock of the man standing before them. John, a rugged figure wrapped in authority, with his rifle aimed steadily, didn't look like a victim. He was a force of nature. One of the intruders scoffed, brandishing a weapon of his own, a cheap pistol that glinted under the kitchen light. And what are you going to do? There was laughter, one that crumbled under the weight of John's calm, unwavering gaze. That stillness was sharper than any weapon. In that heartbeat, he found clarity. He wasn't just protecting his things, he was standing up for his family, his legacy, everything he had fought for since he had taken over this land. He wouldn't let these men take that from him without a fight. Last chance, John said, his voice unwavering. The second intruder, more emboldened than the first, stepped forward. The room felt electric, the air thick between them. Maybe they thought they could intimidate him, that this farmer wouldn't dare pull the trigger. But their bravado only ignited John's resolve. Instead of fear washing over him, a surge of power welled within. He was in control, the stakes were high, and he knew what he had trained for. It wasn't just about protecting his property. It was about saying no, standing firm against anyone who dared to take what he had built. Leveled his rifle, a steady hand calming the trembling of excitement in his gut. You don't want to do this. For a moment, silence fell over them like a thick fog. The intruders exchanged glances, uncertainty brewing behind their masks. Then the moment shattered again, a voice broke through the tension, joining the chaos. Dad, a beam of pure light sliced through the darkness as John's daughter Lily appeared from down the hall, taking in the scene, her eyes wide as saucers. John's heart raced. No, not her. Panic surged, but he stayed calm on the outside. Lily, go back, but in that instant it didn't matter how much he shouted. The intruders were young, rash. The moment she appeared, confusion turned to aggression. They lunged toward her, reaching out to grab her, thinking she was just an obstacle in their path to riches. John's instincts kicked in like a well-oiled machine. He barked, raising the rifle, his voice like thunder, and this time it was filled with desperation, anger, and love. Fingers tightened on the trigger. The world slipped into slow motion. He could hear the pounding of his own heart, the roar of blood rushing through his ears like a tide. Time stretched thin as awareness honed in on the object before him, a young girl, scared and confused, and the threat looming over her. His eyes darted over the scene. The pistol was raised high, but his rifle was steady. He had trained for this moment not through practice, but through the grit of life. In this instant, he understood what it meant to protect, the instinct etched into his very bones. A silence settled like a heavy blanket, thick and tense. Their confidence cracked like fragile glass under the pressure of parental fierceness. There was something primal about a parent's love, a wild, protective energy that electrified the atmosphere. The intruder hesitated, searching for power, but the pulse of the moment shifted, curling around John. "Make your choice," he said firmly, his eyes locked onto the intruders. He could feel the weight of the decision hanging thick, the scramble of panicked thoughts reflected in the intruder's eyes as he weighed the risk before him. Then suddenly they retreated, backing away from Lily, more frightened by John's unwavering presence than eager to push forward. They realized they were outmatched by a man who stood fearless in the face of chaos, a farmer with more crude power than they had anticipated. One shouted, pulling back like a dark cloud moving away from the sun. The others followed, scrambling out through the door like frightened rats escaping a sinking ship. The heavy silence lingered long after they were gone, the weight of what had just transpired still pressing on John's chest. Lily rushed into his arms, and John wrapped her tightly, protective and grateful. "You're safe," he breathed, the reality of the moment crashing over him, heart racing from the adrenaline but peace settling like a balm against his chest. "Dad, I was scared," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I know, sweetheart." He stroked her hair, the warmth of her small frame bringing life back into his shaken resolve. "But you're safe now." In that moment, they stood together, bound by the heart-stopping clash of chaos and love. On that twilight night, they were not just a father and daughter. They were warriors of the heart, defenders of home and hope. And John McAllister would always remember that you don't have to be a soldier to fight. Sometimes all you need is the will to protect what is yours, a heart that beats strong, and the courage to hold your ground even when they kick in the door. The night was unusually quiet on the McAllister farm, a stillness that felt like a calm before the storm. The moon hung high in the sky, spilling soft silver light over the rolling fields. Inside the small farmhouse, a sense of peace wrapped around John McAllister like an old blanket. He leaned back in his chair, cradling a cup of strong coffee, savoring the silence after a long day of work. But that tranquility shattered in an instant. Out of nowhere, a thunderous crash echoed through the dark, rattling the windows. John's heart leaped into his throat. He shot up, instincts kicking in as adrenaline coursed through his veins. Someone had kicked in the door. His mind raced. This was the kind of thing only seen in movies, hardened criminals storming into homes under cover of night. But here, in this quiet corner of the world, it felt surreal, as if the very ground beneath him had shifted. John glanced at the clock, its hands frozen, as if time itself was holding its breath. The intruders moved like shadows, clumsy but intent, their muffled voices blending together in an angry murmur. They were searching for something, and whatever it was, they thought they'd find it here. Little did they know they were stepping into a trap set by the guardian of this land, not an average farmer, but a man prepared for any threat. John's heart hammered wildly, yet he felt a calm wash over him. He had trained for moments like this in a different life, years before the field became his sanctuary. Rifle, an old family heirloom, was hanging on the wall, stored away like a secret weapon waiting to be drawn. It had seen better days, but it held more than just bullets. It held years of perseverance, the weight of every struggle, every hardship. He crept through the darkness, careful to keep his footsteps silent. The intruders were too busy rummaging through drawers and tossing aside his family keepsakes to notice him. They were a trio, dressed in dark clothes, their faces partially concealed by masks. They'd assumed triumph would come easily, that a farmer lived a life of simplicity and vulnerability. But they couldn't have been more wrong. As he approached the living room, he tightened his grip around the rifle, feeling the cool metal against his palms. It felt right, a solid companion in an uncertain time. He peeked around the corner, catching a glimpse of the chaos unfolding. One intruder was cursing as he rummaged through a pile of old bills, while another snickered, feeling entirely too confident. They were a predator, but they had no idea about the real danger lurking in the shadows. That quiet determination whispered to John. It was time to protect what was his, to defend this home that had long been a bastion of resilience. The scent of wood smoke lingered in the air, a reminder that life, even in chaos, could create warmth. He remembered days spent teaching his children about the land, the way they had laughed and played among the rows of crops. It was the very essence of life that now needed defending. He shouted, voice booming, reverberating off the walls. The intruders froze, astonished by the sudden confrontation. This was not a timid farmer begging for mercy. This was a man standing proud, as fierce as the storms that had battered his fields. Their initial shock quickly turned to bravado as they turned to face him, sizing him up. One, taller and bulkier, shouted back, brandishing a knife that glinted in the dim light. He sneered, but John held his ground, unwavering. "You're trespassing." His voice was steady, echoing authority. Years of caring for the land had instilled something in him deeper than mere survival. It was a visceral drive to protect. The second intruder scoffed, his hesitant bravado faltering just a moment. The thrill of the confrontation ignited his earlier confidence, but behind that facade, John saw a flicker of doubt, a realization that maybe this encounter wasn't going to play out exactly as they had planned. John felt that moment stretching, the air thick with tension. The weight of the weapon in his hands was reassuring, but it wasn't just about the rifle. It was about his family, his legacy held within these walls. He wasn't just a farmer, he was a father, a protector, a man with everything to lose. With a swift motion, he raised the rifle, holding it steady. "I'm not afraid to use this," he warned, knowing every word was true. The moment hung, heavy with unspoken fears and challenges. The leader, the one holding the knife, glanced at his companions, doubt creeping into their bravado. Behind John, the family photos lined the walls, a testament to love and resilience. Life had never been easy, but it had always been worth fighting for. "Let's get out of here," the taller one muttered, and that marked a shift in power, realizing they had underestimated the man before them. John didn't move an inch, eyes steady, unwilling to look away from the trespassers who had invaded his peace. "Not so fast," John commanded, voice cutting through the fervor. His mind raced, planning every possible move. Another burst of laughter escaped the group, but it was nervous, unsure. The tide was turning, and John could feel it. He wasn't just holding a gun, he was brandishing resolve. "You have one chance, leave now." In that moment, time slowed. John remembered quiet afternoons spent planting seeds, nurturing them into life. He thought of the weight of responsibility that hung over him, the bills and the land. He thought of his children, tucked snugly in their beds, oblivious to the storm brewing just beyond their door. "Let's not be hasty," the knife-wielding intruder sneered, trying to regain control. "You'd be surprised," John replied, a calm fierceness compelling him to maintain control. He had been preparing for moments like this, those unyielding moments when life demanded everything and more. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen as his daughter Lily stepped into the fray. "Dad." Her voice sliced through the tension. John's heart dropped. He shouted, panic rising higher than he could manage. The intruders turned, eyes widening at the sight of her, and in that split second, John realized he had never felt more vulnerable, yet more empowered. "Nice touch, old man," one of the intruders taunted, emboldened by the sight of the young girl. "You like playing hero?" John bellowed, desperation clawing at him. He could feel the room closing in, chaotic energy threatening to consume them all. "Get away from her." The taller man moved toward Lily, still brandishing that knife like a weapon of power, thinking he could intimidate John into submission. But John was locked and loaded, a relentless monolith against the chaos crashing around them. Lily cried, her small frame trembling. "Breathe," John said, determination lacing his voice. "You're okay." The intruders hesitated, sensing the powerful bond between father and daughter. The shock that had once fuzzy-headed them began to lift, replaced slowly by fear. They hadn't signed up for this. They thought they'd walk into an easy score, but they were starting to feel the weight of their choices. John suddenly felt fierce, the urge to protect surging through him like wildfire. "You don't want to hurt anyone," he stated softly now, channeling that deep-seated courage. The knife wielder paused, his bravado wavering. The room was a volatile mixture of threats and desperation. John could see in their eyes that they carried fear underneath that false bravado, fear that they could lose. John warned again, raising the rifle, pointing it in a way that made the tension electric in the room. His heart surged with wild fury. He had everything to lose and nothing more to prove. One of the intruders, the one in the back, swallowed hard, the bravado peeling away. "Let's just go," he said, voice shaky. The flicker of doubt spread like ripples on a lake, and John seized that moment, feeling the shift underfoot. John shouted, putting the full weight of his presence behind the word. They stumbled back, hesitation making them look foolish, like children caught stealing. They turned and fled, darting through the door, sending it slamming against the wall. The rush of cold air that followed wrapped around John like a lifeline as the realization of what had just transpired flooded in. He stood there, breathless, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Lily rushed into his arms, her warmth grounding him. She exclaimed, her eyes wide with awe. He whispered, holding her tightly, a protective shell against the chaos that had just erupted. "I'm okay," she assured him, voice steady, though her little body still trembled. Together, they took a moment, leaning against the wall as calm settled slowly back into the room. John could feel the essence of what he cherished most surrounding him, the land, the home, and now the fierce love of his daughter. In that moment, he realized courage didn't mean absence of fear. It meant standing tall in its face, fueled by that deep, abiding love for what was essential. He had weathered storms before, but this was a different kind of fight, one that wasn't just for survival, but for everything that made a life worth living. He had risen as a defender, across the vast tracts of land that belonged to his family for generations, against shadows that thought they could steal away the light. The intruders had kicked in the door, thinking they were claimants of the night, but they had awakened a guardian, ready and fierce, locked and loaded against anything that threatened their peace. And as John held Lily close, he knew one thing for certain. They had not just survived, they had triumphed together. The night was thick with silence, the kind that only descends on rural farms deep in the countryside. A lone barn stood against the starry sky, its weathered wood telling tales of storms weathered and hard work earned. Inside the farmhouse, John McAllister was enjoying a rare moment of peace, sipping coffee that had long cooled on the kitchen table, reminiscing about days filled with sunlight and hard labor. The world outside moved slowly, comfortably distant from the chaos of city life. Suddenly, that peace shattered. A loud, splintering crash broke through the stillness, a sound so jarring it shook the very foundation of the home. John's heart raced. The door, someone had kicked it in. He dropped the cup, the contents spilling like his frantic thoughts as he leaped from his chair. Adrenaline surged through him, fueling a fierce urgency. Instinct kicked in. He had to protect what was his. John's hands trembled slightly, but his resolve solidified. This was his land, his family, and they would not take it without a fight. He glanced around the room, taking stock. The rifle, his grandfather's pride, leaned against the wall, a sentinel of decades past, witnessing the struggles and triumphs of the McAllister lineage. Locked and loaded, he whispered to himself, recalling his father's words, a mantra steeped in generations of hard-won strength. He moved swiftly, crouching low to avoid detection. Peering around the corner of the hallway, he spotted 3 figures standing in the living room, boots stomping down on family heirlooms, their laughter cutting through the silence like a knife. They were rough men, dressed in dark clothes and masks, their faces shrouded in shadow yet radiating confidence as if they wore their malice as a badge of honor. One shouted, tossing aside an old photo frame, a tight knot twisted in John's stomach. They didn't realize the true value of what they were tearing apart, the memories, the dedication, the heart that built this home. As they ransacked his living space, John's body tightened with every crumbling piece of his life they disrespected. The rage bubbled within him. Anger was a spirit that can illuminate even the darkest corners of fear. He couldn't allow them to continue. He had a family to protect, a legacy to defend. Without thinking twice, John pushed through the hallway and into the living room. He bellowed, his voice a deep rumble that startled even him. The intruders turned, surprise etching across their faces. In that moment, he stood before them, not just a farmer, but a man forged from years of labor and heart, a statue of resolve, unyielding and ready to defend. One of them quipped, laughter laced with derision. But John felt the weight of his family's history in his grip, the confidence of resilience roaring to life inside him. "I'm not afraid to use this," he declared, raising his rifle slightly, feeling the cold steel resonate with his heartbeat. Laughter turned to hesitation. They blinked at him, suddenly aware they weren't facing an ordinary man. John wasn't some farmhand coward who would cower in the corner. This was not an attack on a property, it was an assault on a way of life. He studied their faces more intently, processing their brash confidence giving way to uncertainty. Yet they shifted, sensing weakness, and one man lunged forward, brandishing a crowbar. He spat, boldness hiding fear, a dangerous combination. "Back away," John warned, anchoring himself firmly. In that moment, he was reminded of storms he faced while tilling the fields, rain lashing down while he stood tall, unfazed. This charge was no different. "Or what? You'll shoot us with what?" The scoffer waved a dismissive hand, but panic flickered in his eyes. At split second, the tension twisted into something tangible, the air humming with the weight of choices. Just then, the kitchen door swung open and John's daughter, Lily, stepped in, her innocent voice echoing, "Dad." Darkness lurked behind the intruders, but what manifested before them now was a radiant light, the heart of a family. John's blood ran cold as fear gripped him. His voice croaked. The very sight of her ignited his will like gasoline on fire. He needed to shield her, to keep her safe. The intruder holding the crowbar's face twisted with glee, seeing not just a chance to claim possessions, but a moment to exploit fear. He howled, eyes trained on Lily with malicious intent. John shouted, that fierce protector rising within him, but another intruder, a bulkier man, shoved the first one aside, eyeing Lily with greed. "We'll take her too," he sneered, taking a painful step toward her. In that pulse of a heartbeat, everything seemed to slow down. John's mind narrowed, the world around him fading away except for the threat before him and his daughter's trembling figure. "Step any closer and I swear I'll shoot," John warned, his hands steady now, every ounce of fear transformed into determination. The rifle felt heavier and yet lighter, forged from the sweat of his brow, the promise of protection in his hands. The laughter faded as they weighed their options, the thrill of bravado replaced with the heavy air of danger. One shouted back, but John could see their resolve crack. The barrier of confidence began to crumble as they caught sight of the fire burning in his eyes. "Try me," John replied, voice low and controlled. He could see their hesitation, a flickering fear wrecking their bravado like a storm stripping trees bare. He could feel Lily's small frame behind him, her breath quickening, mirroring the pounding of his heart. The lead intruder chose to retreat slightly, his posture shifting under the pressure. "Let's just get what we can and leave," he said, glancing at his accomplices, uncertainty gnawing at him like a predator cornered. But it was John who seized the moment. It was a gamble, but he didn't care. At that moment, it wasn't about possessions, it was about life, about standing his ground. An unsettling silence filled the room, thick and palpable. John could feel the air fabricating their fears, weaving stories of regret and panic in their minds. They thought they were invincible, but now they faced reality, a man who would bend but not break. The heavyset one called out, tugging at the others like a lifeline. They might have been prepared for a quick score, but they were caught unprepared for the fierce spirit that held this property together. With one last glance at the chaos they had wrought, they turned and bolted for the door, retreating like shadows fleeing from the dawn. John stood firm, rifle still raised until they were out of sight, the darkness of night swallowing them whole. For a moment, silence engulfed the room, heavy but cleansing, like after a storm. John lowered the rifle, breathing heavily but relieved, the tension releasing from his muscles gradually. He turned to Lily, her wide eyes still reflecting the fear of the moment. She whispered, vulnerability threading through her voice. He wrapped her in his arms, pulling her close, soaking in the warmth of her little frame against his chest. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he assured her, though he could feel the tremor of adrenaline still racing through his veins. "You're safe now." "But they were so scary," she murmured, her voice trembling as John stroked her hair soothingly, grounding them both back in reality. "I know. But they learned something tonight," he said, glancing toward the shattered door, pieces of wood strewn about like discarded dreams. As he held her close, the weight of the confrontation began to settle. He had faced real danger, yet emerged with his spirit intact. He remembered his father's warnings. The darker corners of the world always loomed outside, but it was love, determination, and a fierce heart that shielded them. The moonlight streamed through the broken door, illuminating the remnants of the chaos, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could break through. They stood together in that moment, breathing in the quiet that followed, two souls joined in a world that often felt uncertain but was fortified by courage. For John, the fight was more than just a moment of survival. It was a testament to the love that burned brighter than fear. He was more than just a farmer. He was a man, a protector of hope, standing tall and resolute against the darkness that might dare to encroach, ready to defend what he held dearest. They would rise above, anchored in the soil that had held their lives together, woven in the fabric of perseverance, fighting for the light that remained. In that moment, it was clear they had not only survived. They had triumphed over fear, united by the strength of love and resilience, ready to face another day in this uncertain world, knowing they were safe within the walls of their home, locked and loaded with hope. The sun had set long ago, folding the world into a deep, shadowy stillness. A soft breeze stirred the air, ruffling the leaves of the trees surrounding the McAllister farm. Inside the cozy farmhouse, the glow from a single lamp illuminated the kitchen where John McAllister sat, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. Outside, the sounds of crickets hummed a gentle chorus, their rhythm a reminder of another peaceful night. But that calm shattered like glass. A thunderous crash echoed through the night, an explosion of wood and metal as the front door burst open, sending splinters flying. John's heart leaped into his throat. Someone was breaking into his home. The adrenaline hit him like a bullet. Every instinct screamed at him to protect his family. He tossed the mug aside, the hot coffee splattering across the floor, creating dark stains that seemed to mirror the urgency welling inside him. He wasn't just a farmer out here. He was a father, a protector, a man fully devoted to his land and his loved ones. John moved swiftly but quietly, slipping from the kitchen into the darkened hallway. He could hear the low grunts and muffled voices of the intruders as they kicked through his living room. There were at least two of them, maybe three, shrouded in the darkness, their forms twisted and shadowy. They were searching, clawing through his life, looking for anything they could easily grab. He edged closer, the old wooden floorboards creaking under his weight, each sound echoing louder in the tense silence. The air was thick, charged with both fear and rage. The instinct to fight surged inside him, driven by years of hard work and dedication to this very place. The rifle hung in the corner, a family heirloom passed down through generations, a symbol of resolve. As he approached the doorway leading to the living room, he took a deep breath. His heart raced not just with fear, but with the determination woven into the very fabric of his being. "I'm not going to let you take what's mine," he growled under his breath. One of the intruders shouted, his voice dripping with impatience. "The old man's probably asleep." John clenched his jaw, anger swelling within him like a volcano about to erupt. They thought he would be easy prey, just a farmer tending the land. But they had no idea who they were dealing with, the years of toil and sweat that had etched strength into his bones. He stepped into the living room, the glow from the window spilling light onto the chaos before him. The intruders were laughing, tossing aside family portraits and books like they meant nothing. One of them held a crowbar, swinging it blithely as if daring John to move. But they would see, they would learn. John shouted, his voice erupting with power, slicing through the haze of arrogance that enveloped the room. Both the intruders froze, their laughter dying on their lips as they turned to face him, wide-eyed and shocked. The taller one sneered, but his bravado was like a balloon losing air, the air of confidence disappearing as they realized they had walked into a lion's den. "The one standing between you and your bad decisions," John replied, raising his rifle slightly, its weight familiar in his hands. "You've got one chance. The room crackled with tension, a fragile thread hanging dangerously in the balance. The shorter intruder's hands shook slightly as he glanced between John and his partner, uncertainty flooding his face. He whispered, fear creeping into his voice. Whatever, man, the taller one barked, desperation creeping into his tone as he tried to maintain control. But John could see the cracks forming in their bravado. They had come looking for riches, thinking this place was an easy score, but they had underestimated him. I won't say it again, John warned, feeling the pulse of courage thumping in his chest. Those moments of conflict require a heart of steel, a mind clear and decisive. He had faced storms on the farm before, but this was different. This was personal. They edged closer, thinking their numbers gave them an advantage, but John stood his ground, gripping the rifle tightly. I don't want to hurt anyone, just leave, taunted the crowbar wielder, his bravado straining against the weight of the moment. In that heartbeat, time froze. John's resolve solidified as a memory washed over him. A cold winter night spent teaching his daughter about courage and standing for what is right. His family's laughter echoed in his mind, shielding him against the encroaching darkness. He replied evenly, holding steady. He was locked and loaded, not just with the rifle, but with an ironclad will tempered by love and loyalty. Suddenly, the tension exploded. The heavier man lunged forward, intent on knocking John's rifle away. A sense of disbelief washed over John, but he didn't flinch. He pulled the trigger, the gunshot roaring through the room, echoing against the wall's pure sound unleashed. The bullet hit the wall just above the intruder's shoulder, sending plaster tumbling. Startled, the men recoiled, terrified now, realizing too late the farm wasn't just an easy score. It was a fortress guarded by a man ready to fight. Get out, John shouted again, his voice booming, filled with the authority of a man who knows he has everything to protect. The intruders' faces twisted with panic. They stumbled back toward the door, their bravado evaporating in an instant. They hadn't anticipated failure, hadn't come prepared for this fierce confrontation. One of them tripped over a chair, crashing to the ground, but he scrambled to his feet, fear propelling him onward. As they darted through the broken doorway, time resumed its normal pace. John was left standing, rigid with adrenaline, a mixture of triumph and disbelief swirling within him. He had done it. He had defended his home. But just as he began to breathe again, he heard another sound, the familiar soft padding of small feet. His daughter Lily stood at the corner of the hallway, wide-eyed, clutching her stuffed teddy bear. The world snapped back into sharp focus. She asked, voice barely above a whisper. It was a question laced with terror and confusion, each syllable a tremor in the air. For an instant, John's heart twisted in anguish. He had been so focused on the threat that loomed, he had lost sight of the innocent heart that beat so close to his own. He rushed to her, enveloping her in a protective embrace, holding her tight against his chest. She murmured, her soft voice tremulous. Yes, sweetheart, it's over, he reassured her, wiping away the moment's fear with the warmth of his love. The warmth of her small body against him anchored him, grounding the chaos of the last few moments. But I heard the noise, she whimpered, pulling closer. I thought. John knelt down, meeting her wide, innocent eyes. They were just scared, honey, and when people are scared, they do stupid things, he said softly, brushing her hair back from her face. But we don't have to be scared. He pulled back just enough to see her face, searching for any sign of fear. Look at me, he said, his voice steady. I will protect you. In that moment, he realized the true weight of the night. They might have kicked in the door, thinking they could take whatever they wanted, but now they had learned that this family was stronger than their threats. Love fortified their walls, charging the air with the kind of strength that simply could not yield. In the face of danger, John had unleashed a spirit that would not be broken. With a sense of relief washing over him, John stood, Lily still tucked under his arm, as he surveyed the remnants of the mayhem. He'd have to repair the door, clean the scattered debris, restore the sanctuary they had built together. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was the lesson learned. Lily asked, her eyes lighting up with innocence, momentarily forgetting the fear. John chuckled, the sound echoing through the shattered silence, washing away the remnants of darkness that had dared to intrude. Ice cream sounds like a great idea. Together, they ventured into the kitchen, a place that had been a source of warmth and comfort since the day they moved in. John opened the freezer, pulling out a tub, the familiar brand creating an instant bond, memories of laughter and happiness flooding in. As they sat at the table, spooning ice cream, John reflected on the fragile nature of security. Fear might come knocking, daunting and real, but courage would always hold the door tight against it. As they shared stories and laughter around the table, the world outside faded away, the night stretching its heavy hand behind them. In the quiet of an ordinary evening, they had forged something extraordinary, a bond strengthened in battle, hearts locked and loaded with love, ready for whatever storms life may bring. The echoes of their triumph lingered in the air, a reminder of resilience, of the spirit that refuses to yield. And while the door may have been broken, it was merely a threshold. Each crack and splinter told their story, a tale of survival, of heart, of a family that would stand firm no matter how fiercely the world outside tried to break in. The night was heavy with the scent of freshly cut hay, a stillness that blanketed the McAllister farm. Underneath the vast expanse of stars, John McAllister leaned against the wooden railing of his porch, soaking in the tranquility. Days filled with toil gave way to peaceful nights, a rhythm he had cherished for years. But as his hand gripped the cool glass of sweet tea, a deep, unsettling thud echoed through the quiet like a cannon shot. The sound drew his heart into his throat. He dropped the drink, watching it spill across the porch floor like a shattering illusion of peace. Before he could register what was happening, another crash reverberated through the darkness, the unmistakable sound of his front door being kicked in. Adrenaline surged through his veins, a primal burst of energy channeled straight toward his instincts. John's heart raced as he pushed open the screen door, ready to confront whatever nightmare had descended upon his home. The world outside appeared unchanged, yet he could feel a tension brewing, a storm gathering in the shadows. His thoughts raced back to the stories he'd heard from the old-timers at the diner, tales of violence creeping into quiet places, towns upended by threats lurking in the dark. He had never believed it would happen to him, to his family. He moved quietly through the house, each creak of the floorboards amplifying his anxiety. The living room lay just ahead, the warm glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the cluttered space. He peered around the corner, his breath hitching as he took in the sight. Three figures, just beyond the threshold of everything he held dear, were ransacking his sanctuary. They were rough-looking men, dressed in black, masks partially obscuring their faces. The tallest one held a crowbar in one hand, swinging it aimlessly as if it were an extension of his own body. Broken furniture lay scattered, family photos tossed aside like mere trash. A wild anger flared in John's chest, not just anger fury. He shouted, his voice booming, cutting through the night like a blade. The men froze, their surprise evident, eyes snapping toward him. A moment stretched like an elastic band, tension crackling in the air. The tallest man scoffed, recovering his confidence, but John could see the flicker of fear behind the bravado. It was always there, bubbling just beneath the surface. "I'm the one standing between you and a bad decision," John replied, standing tall, widening his stance. He didn't want to appear threatening, but the rifle that hung by the door felt reassuring in the back of his mind. Another man sneered, stepping forward, the bravado growing with each stride. These men thought strength stemmed from numbers, but they had no idea what resolve looked like, and John was all resolve. "Or I will make you wish you had," he warned, voice steady and firm. The rifle was not just a weapon, it was a promise to protect, to defend, and to stand firm in the face of chaos. For a heartbeat, they hesitated, exchanging glances filled with uncertainty. It was a reflection of their inner thoughts, doubts gnawing at their bravado. "Come on. Let's get what we came for," the taller one barked, trying to regain control, but their power was slipping away. Just then, the kitchen door creaked open, and John's young daughter Lily stepped out, her innocent eyes searching for the cause of the commotion. She asked, confusion lining her voice, panic clutched at John's heart. He shouted, urgency punctuating his words, his fear evident. He needed to shield her from this nightmare that had invaded their home, but it was too late. The intruder's attention shifted to her, and John realized the danger that had just stepped into the fire. The taller man's eyes lit up with the twisted pleasure of opportunity. "Look at the little girl, maybe she can tell us where the good stuff is," he taunted, taking a step closer. "No," John roared, pure terror igniting a fierce protective instinct within him. He felt his heart pounding, the world narrowing down to the threat before him, and everything else faded away. "Well, what's the matter, old man?" The man brandished the crowbar, gesturing like a fool, but John could see the tentativeness in his movement. They were here to steal, but they had no idea what kind of fight they were in for. John shouted, his resolve hardening. He could feel the cold steel of the rifle against his chest, the weight and responsibility that came with it. He wouldn't just stand there while they terrorized his family. In that electric moment, the air charged with an unspoken challenge, the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. John shifted his feet, ready to make a move, when suddenly bang, the sound echoed off the walls as he pulled the trigger. The rifle recoiled against him with power, and the intruder stumbled back, shock written across his face. Fear erupted in the eyes of the remaining two men. Their bravado shattered like glass, the fear that held them captive for so long now turned tangible. One of them yelled, panic spilling from his lips as they scrambled toward the door. They rushed past Lily, who had frozen, eyes wide with fear. She whispered, her voice trembling. "It's okay, sweetheart, you're safe," John assured her, rushing to wrap her in his arms, enveloping her in the warmth and safety that only a father could provide. "They're gone." Lily clung to him as he caught his breath, glancing back at the door that had been breached with such violent intent. His heart thudded in his chest as the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a wave of protectiveness. He turned to his daughter. "I need you to go to your room and stay there, okay?" she asked, her little voice breaking his heart. "I will, just go and lock your door," he instructed calmly, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. Once he was sure she was safe, John moved through the wreckage of their living room, anger boiling beneath the surface. The broken door stood as a grim reminder that every ounce of peace they had built could be shattered in an instant. Every laugh, every meal shared around the table now felt threatened. He glanced outside, expecting to see the intruders retreating into the night, but instead saw only shadows in the distance. They had underestimated him, thought they could waltz into his life without consequences. Now they were on the run, darting down the gravel road, and John stood at the threshold of his home, a silent sentinel against the darkness. Taking a deep breath, he stepped outside, the cool night air mixing with the heat of his anger. He surveyed the scene, the remnants of their intrusion, a broken picture frame lying amidst the splintered door and shattered furniture. It was a snapshot of their lives, lovingly preserved, now marred by this violent act. John felt a rush of emotions, fear, anger, sorrow, but beneath it all was a flame igniting within. It was a familiar feeling tugging at his resolve to protect his family, to reclaim that sense of safety that had been shaken. In that moment of clarity, he understood something deeply profound. He would not just be a victim, he would be a guardian. He returned to the house, each creak of his boots echoing a newfound purpose. Inside, the chaos felt overwhelming, but he took a moment to collect himself. He couldn't afford to spiral. His family needed him strong more than ever. As he surveyed the room, a strange calm washed over him, the chaos of the night fading into the background. He grabbed the broom and started sweeping up the debris, grounding himself in the simple task. They had kicked in the door, but they would not take the heart out of his home. With each sweep, he felt the tension begin to release. He was a farmer, a builder, a nurturer, not a destroyer. He had fought storms, droughts, and hard winters, always finding a way to carry on. This was just another fight, another storm to weather, and he would do it with integrity, with love for his family guiding him. Soon, Lily appeared in the doorway, her small frame hesitant but curious. She asked. "Yeah, I'm okay," he said, setting the broom aside and kneeling to meet her gaze. She whispered, vulnerability radiating from her wide eyes. "Promise, I will always be here for you," he reassured her, and they wrapped their arms around each other, feeling the strength of their bond, a love that could sift through any darkness. Just then, a car's headlights swept across the yard, cutting through the night, illuminating the chaos around them. John's heart sank. It was a reminder that the threat hadn't entirely vanished. He peered through the window, squinting against the light. Through the windshield, he recognized the vehicle, a sheriff's patrol truck. Relief flooded over him as the officer stepped out, his expression shifting from routine to concern as he took in the scene before him. "John," the sheriff called, hustling toward the house. "I'm fine, but they kicked in the door," John replied, a mix of relief and tension flooding through him. They were after something, but they ran off. The sheriff nodded, scanning the broken door and the debris scattered across the floor. "I'll call for backup, but it sounds like you did what you had to do," he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. John could see it in the man's eyes, a recognition of the strength required to stand up against fear. "They thought they could take what was mine," John said, his voice steady, thoughts fighting to untangle from the chaos. The sheriff nodded knowingly. "It happens more than you'd think around here." As the sheriff relayed the report, John took a deep breath, a weight lifting off his shoulders, though the night was still thick with uncertainty. In that moment, he understood something vital. Fear could lock doors, but love and bravery could break them down. With Lily at his side, watching the sheriff maintain order in the aftermath, John felt a surge of resolve. No matter how many threats arose, he would be ready, not just standing on guard, but charged with the spirit of protection. The evening, once filled with the sweet sounds of country life, now pulsed with the raw reality of danger, but John understood that uncertainty was part of the landscape they walked. He wouldn't back down, he couldn't afford to. As the sun rose the next morning, illuminating the remnants of chaos, John would rebuild not just the door but the confidence to keep moving forward. They had buckled under pressure, but together they would grow stronger. With a renewed sense of purpose, he felt the weight of his love for Lily grounding him. They would rise together, locked and loaded not just with arms, but with resilience, fierce love, and the unwavering spirit of a farmer ready to defend everything he cherished. In the end, it wasn't simply about surviving the night, it was about creating a bulwark against fear and doubt. They would not only recover, they would emerge transformed, armed with the unbreakable bond between a father and daughter, ready for whatever storms might come next. The stillness of the rural night was shattered by a loud bang, like a gunshot piercing the darkness. John McAllister barely had time to process what was happening before the sound echoed again. This time closer, his front door had just been kicked in. Adrenaline surged through him as he jumped from his chair, heart pounding, instincts on high alert. He had worked tirelessly on this land, his home, for over a decade, planting seeds of hope and harvesting dreams. Now it felt like everything he held dear was under siege. Throwing open the kitchen door, John slipped into the hallway, every nerve in his body attuned to the chaos unfolding just beyond the living room. The distant echoes of laughter mixed with shouts floated through the air, a raucous sound that tore through the night and sent a chill down his spine. Three figures, a trio of intruders, were scrambling through his home, complete disregard for the sanctity of his life evident in their every move. The oversized man in the lead held a crowbar, swinging it carelessly as he rummaged through drawers and tossed aside family keepsakes. He roared, but John knew better. To him, everything was priceless. As memories flashed through his mind, his wedding photo on the mantle, old baseball trophies of his son, and toys long forgotten, he felt a fire ignite within him. They were not just hitting the home, they were assaulting everything he had fought for. Slipping closer, John steadied his breath. The heavy silence of the night pressed down on him, a stark contrast to the cacophony inside his house. He shouted, his voice deep and commanding, echoing against the walls like a thunderclap. The intruders froze, eyes widening in shock. He could see the surprise flicker across their faces, but their bravado was quick to return. The tallest one sneered, stepping forward. John wasn't afraid. Years of hard work had shaped him into a pillar of strength. He was not just a farmer, he was a warrior committed to protecting everything he loved. "You're trespassing," John replied, his voice steady, a force against the uncertainty swirling in the air. The taller thug laughed, brandishing the crowbar like a weapon, but John held his ground. He could feel the weight of the rifle he kept propped against the wall nearby, the metal cold and solid. It was not just a tool, it was a promise of protection, a commitment to his family and home. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. Panic surged through John as he realized his daughter Lily had entered the room, her small figure framed by the doorway. She called out, her voice breaking the tension like a fragile glass. "Lily," John yelled, desperation lacing his words as he stepped between her and the intruders. The sight of her sent adrenaline coursing through him like fire. She should be safe, tucked away in her bed, not caught in this nightmare. The towering intruder's eyes lit up at the sight of Lily. "Look, a little girl." He taunted, stepping closer, the crowbar raised like a weapon. The laughter that had filled the room fell silent, replaced by a deep dread. John bellowed, fury igniting within. This was no longer just about material things. This was about defending his family. Every instinct within him screamed to protect Lily, to keep her safe from this chaos. The intruder sneered, pushing forward. John felt a wave of rage wash over him, blurring the lines of fear. "You're just a farmer." Time slowed as John locked eyes with the intruder, the world around him fading into a blur. "I can fight," he said, his voice low and steady. They underestimated him, mistaking his quiet life for weakness. They had no idea who they were challenging. In that moment, he pulled the rifle into his hands, the weight familiar, a cold steel extension of his will. A collective gasp filled the room as John raised the rifle, aiming it at the intruder. He commanded, his words laced with raw authority. Laughs from earlier fell silent. The towering intruder took a step back, hesitating. He asked, bravado lost. "Try me," John replied, voice firm, confidence cut from steel. The air around them swirled like a storm. His heart thundered, but so did his resolve. He would not be a victim tonight. In that tense moment, the air crackled with fear and uncertainty. Another intruder, sensing the shift, said, "We didn't come here to hurt anyone, just..." "No chance," John replied, unwavering. As the words left his lips, he could see the doubt settling in the eyes of the intruders. The weight of their thoughts mirrored the tension in the room, shifting like leaves caught in a gusty wind. They were no longer predators, they were cornered, fearful, and lost. The taller intruder glanced at his friends, weighing their options. In that dangerous silence, they were faced with the uncertain outcome of their choices. Fear had a way of distorting perspectives, blurring the line between courage and stupidity. Then in one swift motion, the intruder lunged forward, crowbar aimed at John. But John's instincts kicked in. He aimed the rifle and pulled the trigger. The loud blast shattered the silence, sending a shockwave of reality through the room. The bullet pierced the wall just above the trespasser's shoulder, sending him reeling back. Panic turned the others into startled deer, wide-eyed and frozen. One shouted, grabbing the doorframe as if it were a lifeline. John barked, watching as they stumbled back, scrambling over one another in their haste to escape. They had come expecting an unguarded home, but what they found instead was a man who would fight to protect everything he loved. As they fled into the night, John lowered the rifle but kept it close. His breath came in heavy heaves as he returned his focus to Lily, who stood frozen in place, her eyes wide and brimming with tears. She asked, small and vulnerable, her trust quaking beneath the weight of fear. "I'm okay, sweetheart," he assured her, rushing to her side. He knelt down, wrapping his arms around her, holding her tightly against his chest. "You're safe now," she whispered, her voice trembling with confusion. "I heard the noise and then you yelled." "I know, Lily, but sometimes people make bad choices that put others in danger," he explained, feeling the weight of every word. He glanced around the room, the chaos left behind a testament to the confrontation. Books were toppled, chairs overturned, each mark a reminder of their intrusion. She asked, her voice wavering. "No one is coming back here," he said firmly, feeling the surge of protectiveness flood his veins. "This is our home, and I will do everything to keep it safe." John rose, still holding Lily close, and together they entered the living room. The aftermath stretched before him, a stark reminder of the reality they had just faced. But in this moment of vulnerability, he felt a burning resolve rising within him. This chaos would not define them. Instead, it would become a story of strength, of a father's love. As he surveyed the damage, he could almost see the pieces of their lives weaving back together, a mosaic of memories still intact. He reached out and picked up Lily's favorite stuffed bear, cradling it gently. "You're gonna be okay," he whispered to her, more for himself than for her. John set the bear down and turned his gaze towards the shattered door, the very threshold that had once held his peace. "We can fix this, honey," he said, determination lacing his voice. Just then, a familiar sound echoed outside, the gentle rumble of a truck approaching. He stepped to the window and saw the familiar headlights shining against the dark. It was Old Man Jenkins, a neighbor who had lived down the road for decades. The old man hopped out of the truck, moving with the kind of urgency that was reserved for serious moments. John heard some noise out this way. He called out, leaning against the truck for support. "We had some unwanted guests, but I think they learned a lesson," John replied, his chest swelling with pride. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with the adrenaline of triumph. "I'll help you get this cleaned up. Don't you worry," Jenkins said, stepping up on the porch, ready to join the fight for their community. And in that moment, John felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Neighbors became family, and shared struggles created unbreakable bonds. He looked down at Lily, who had now found a spot on the floor, clutching her bear close, watching the scene unfold with wide-eyed fascination. He said, putting a reassuring hand on her shoulder, "You're not alone." Jenkins began picking up the scattered pieces, a testament to camaraderie even in the face of adversity. Working side by side, John could feel the healing begin, the strength of community wrapping around them like a warm blanket. As the sun began to rise, casting golden rays across the land, John stood with his neighbors, shoulder to shoulder, a fortress against the uncertainties of the world. He understood that threats might come and go, but the love of family and community remained steadfast, unyielding. In that moment, John felt a sense of peace wash over him. They had kicked in the door, but the farmer was locked, loaded, and prepared to face whatever storm might come next. The heart of a farm held more than just land. It held love, resilience, and an unyielding spirit. And as they worked together to restore what had been disrupted, John realized they had not just defended their home, they had forged an unbreakable bond in the fire of adversity. Together, they would stand against any storm, united, powerful, and ready to face tomorrow. Each moment would become a story woven into their lives, a legacy to be passed down, like the land itself, unbroken, thriving, and forever theirs. The night air was thick and humid, a blanket oppressive enough to make every breath feel heavy. John McAllister leaned against the porch railing, taking in the rhythmic symphony of crickets chirping in the distance. This was his sanctuary, patch of earth he had nurtured through the sweat of his brow and the love for his family. The stars hung low, twinkling like a promise in the inky sky. But then that calm was shattered. A thunderous crash echoed through the night, splitting the air like a bolt of lightning. John's heart dropped as a second, even louder bang rang out. Someone was kicking in the front door of his home. He bolted upright, every ounce of tranquility replaced by a fierce urgency. The quiet life he had built was under siege, and he had to defend it. His mind raced, fueled by years of hard work and dedication poured into this farm. There was no time to waste. He rushed through the kitchen, heart pounding, each beat echoing in his ears like a drum roll of impending chaos. He peered around the corner and caught a glimpse of the living room, a scene that froze him in place. 3 men, shadows in the dim light, were bustling about, tearing through his possessions as if they were merely objects to be discarded. One held a crowbar, brandishing it carelessly, while another rattled off commands, tossing aside family photos, toys, and cherished mementos. One shouted, a sneer creeping across his face. The casual dismissal of what was sacred ignited a fire in John's chest. These men didn't understand that every piece of this house told a story. Each item echoed laughter, tears, hard work, and devotion. He could feel the heat of rage claw its way up from the pit of his stomach. John bellowed, his voice rolling like thunder in the still night air, drowning out the intruder's laughter. Instantly, all 3 froze, surprise washing over their faces. The tallest one sneered, regaining composure quickly. John's grip tightened around the doorframe as he stepped forward, ready to confront them, fueled by a mixture of fear and fierce protection. "You have one chance to leave before things get ugly," he warned, his voice steady, every word laced with authority. "Oh, look at the tough guy," another one scoffed, stepping forward with bravado, clearly inflating his courage. "What are you gonna do?" He felt the presence of the rifle behind him, resting on the wall, a symbol of his preparedness and his commitment to protect what was his. John had faced many storms in life, none quite like this, but he wasn't about to back down. "Try me," he said, eyes narrowing, daring them to take a step closer. He could feel the thrum of adrenaline, the primal instinct to defend his territory coursing through his veins. In that tense moment, the door to the kitchen creaked open, and out stepped Lily, his 8-year-old daughter, her small frame silhouetted against the fading light. She called out softly, confusion coloring her voice. John shouted, urgency weaving through his words. He needed to shield her from this horror. Before he could react, the tallest intruder's eyes gleamed with malicious intent. He growled, stepping towards her. John thundered, his heart racing, a torch of fierce protectiveness igniting within him. It wasn't just about possessions anymore. This was a primal fight for his family. "Don't you threaten me, old man. We're just here for a little fun," the intruder retorted, the mocking laughter spilling out, but John could see the fear just beneath the surface. John roared, determination hardening his voice. The darkness of the night wrapped around them, stifling, but he would not let fear consume him. Just as the man took another step forward, John's instincts kicked in. This was his land, and his family came first. With a swift motion, John reached for the rifle leaning against the wall. In a heartbeat, the cold metal was in his hands. The intruder's face twisted in surprise, but that hesitation lasted only a moment. "Watch me," John replied, leveling the rifle at the intruder. Suddenly, everything slowed down. The air felt thick with tension, squeezing around them like a vice. He could hear his heart pounding, feel every breath he took. The line between fear and resolve blurred. He saw the other intruders exchange glances, the bravado falling away as they realized that this wasn't a joke. "Let her go," he commanded, voice steady yet fierce. "Come on, man, we don't need to do this," the second intruder babbled, now faltering under pressure. "We can just leave." But John wasn't willing to negotiate. "You're in my home. You think you can come in here and just take what you want?" Just then, the taller intruder lunged forward, trying to grab the rifle from John's grip. Without thinking, John pulled the trigger. A deafening roar echoed through the room, shattering the frail air of nighttime tranquility. The bullet grazed the wall, narrowly missing the intruder, who stumbled back, eyes wide with shock. Panic rippled through the remaining two, their bravado torn apart like paper. "What the fuck?" one shouted, their confidence now deflated. In a flash, they turned and bolted for the door, leaving a trail of chaos in their wake. John stood firm, breathing heavily, the echoes of gunfire fading into the night. The adrenaline surged through him, but as the weight of reality descended over his shoulders, he felt the desperate need to protect Lily more than ever. The little girl stood frozen in the doorway, eyes wide and brimming with tears. She whispered, her voice barely audible, a tiny flicker of innocence flickering against the darkness. John rushed toward her, gathering her up in his arms, wrapping her in the warmth of his embrace. "You're safe now," she sobbed, burying her face in his shoulder. "I know, sweetheart." "I know," he whispered, heart churning as he looked down at her. "But I won't let anyone hurt you." He pulled back and wiped a tear from her cheek, his heart heavy with the knowledge that innocence had been chipped away by the night's events. She asked, her small voice tinged with uncertainty. He tried to reassure her, though he could feel the lingering effects of adrenaline coursing through him. The reality of the situation weighed on his mind, a ferocious storm brewing within. As they stood there, the remnants of chaos around them seemed surreal, time stretching as he collected his thoughts. The broken door, the scattered possessions, their home had been violated in ways he never imagined. "Daddy, I'm scared," she murmured again, and John knelt to her level, looking deep into her eyes. "You're safe because I'm here." In that moment, the noise from outside reached them, a distant sound of sirens cutting through the darkness. Relief wrapped around him, but it was laced with apprehension. The reality of the assault began to settle in. "Daddy," Lily whispered, her voice shaking again. John's heart raced as he tightened his grip around her. "They won't," he said firmly, but doubts flickered in his mind, worries for her safety. As the sirens grew closer, his resolute determination hardened. This was their life, and he wasn't about to let it shatter. He would guard it fiercely. Drawing a deep breath, he pulled Lily close, feeling her warmth against him, while the shadows cast by the night loomed outside. "Let's clean this up while we wait for the deputies. We can't let them win," he said, pulling himself together. With each movement, picking up shattered pieces of wood and scattered belongings, he felt an ember of newfound strength growing within him. He would not let fear define him. He would become a guardian, embodying the spirit of resilience passed down through generations on this land. Just then, there was a knock at the door, a heavy, authoritative knock that sent a jolt through him. As he approached the door, the whirling emotions clashed in his mind. Was it the deputy? Was it the intruders? He took a deep breath, steadied himself, and flung the door open. Outside stood two deputies, guns drawn, wary expressions on their faces. One of them shouted, scanning the yard. "We're safe," John replied, forcing conviction into his voice even as his heart raced. But they kicked in the door. The other deputy pressed, face serious, glancing around the property as if expecting the shadows to spring back to life. "No, they ran off," John said, the reality of the situation weighing down. He gestured to the rifle, still in his grip, a heavy statement of authority. The deputies exchanged a look, and one of them stepped closer, voice low yet pointed. "You need to secure your property." The words sent a tidal wave of realization crashing over John. He wasn't just defending against a momentary threat, he was standing on the brink of something darker. "Maybe they will," he said, resolve shaping his voice. With the watchful deputies by his side, a renewed sense of strength coursed through him. He was locked, loaded, and determined to face whatever came next. But as they began to assess the damage and secure the area, a rustling sound came from the edge of the property, a figure emerging from the shadows. The hairs on John's neck stood on end. He whispered under his breath, eyes darting towards the sound. The deputies turned, hands gripping their weapons, anticipation gripping the air. The sounds grew closer, and the figure stepped into the dim light of the porch. And just like that, the night shifted once more, and John's heart dropped as he recognized the figure stepping into view. This wasn't over, not by a long shot.